The home inspection law here in Massachusetts begins next month, and the draft regulations to adhere to the home inspection law have been put out. And you realtors, my friends, now have the opportunity to weigh in on these regulations before the state makes them final. Anthony Lamacchia here, broker owner of Lamacchia Realty and owner of Crush It in Real Estate. And I just sat here. I had a call with our attorney 3 times today, and I read through the summary of the draft regulations. I read through the full regulations. And our attorney, Mr. Michael McDonough, pointed out that there is a conflict in the language between the actual statute, which is the law that passed last August, and the regulations. Now, the good news is the regulations seem to be a little softer and a little bit more realistic. However, I can't say I blame them for being a little bit different, because imagine being in a regulator's shoes when you receive this piece of junk law that went into place last August that basically says 2 things. Now remember, I explained this back on April 3rd. I'm going to go through a quick summary now and then get back to this, and then I'm going to provide you all with contact information so that you can send your feedback into the regulators. But when this law went through, Chapter 150, and it was part of the Affordable Homes Act, okay? Section 45 specifically talked about 2 things. Condition of acceptance of an offer to purchase on the prospective purchaser's agreement to waive, limit, restrict, or otherwise forego any prospective purchaser's right to have the structure or unit inspected. They basically were saying in the first bullet point that a seller's not allowed to say, I will only consider offers where there's an inspection waived. A seller can no longer say that once that goes into play. Now, in the practical world, we all know that doesn't really happen in an advertised perspective on an MLS listing sheet or anywhere else, but in final negotiations and multiple offer situations, some of that conversation may happen. This law says it cannot happen. Now, the next one, which I find to be insane, and I talked about, I mean, they're both insane, but this one's more insane, and I talked about this in my last video. And this says, no seller shall accept an offer to purchase from a prospective purchaser or an agent thereof who, in advance of the seller's acceptance of an offer, informs the seller either directly or indirectly that the prospective purchaser intends to waive the inspection. That's the statute. That's the law. Then you pull out the new regulation, you can see they dumbed it down a little. Well, credit to the regulators, because they realized this is ridiculous. Remember in my last video when I talked about, remember when I gave the example of the seller being informed from their listing agent that they got an offer for $27 million over asking? Take a look. Hi, Mr. Seller. It's me, your listing broker. I have to tell you, we have an offer on your home, $27 million over asking price, but you're forbidden from taking it. Why am I forbidden from taking it? Well, they've informed me that they're not going to be conducting an inspection, and they've waived the right to inspection. But it's $27 million over asking price. I know you can't take it, all because of Chapter 150, an act relative to the Affordable Homes Act, Section 40. What? What? This is lunacy. Buyers have a right to waive. Sellers have a right to accept, counter, or deny. See that? Imagine that. Imagine being that seller and you're told, hey, we got an offer, $27 million over asking, but you can't take it because of this new law. It's insane, right? It's insane. So the regulators must have realized that. They also must have realized that this law, they're calling it, I mean, it is a law, but it's absurd. It directly conflicts with the fiduciary duty that is required of a buyer's agent here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts when representing a buyer. Their duty is to advocate for their client, to do all they can to help their client's offer get accepted when a client says, I want that property. So the regulators must have said, well, how in heck are we going to enforce that people can't have conversations, that buyer's agents aren't allowed to verbally say it? So what I suspect happened when they came out with their detailed regulations is they said, yeah, maybe we should just say they can't have it in the contracts. Let me read this. And they're directly tied to Section 2. Here we go. A seller of a residential property or their agent shall not accept an offer to purchase from a prospective purchaser or an agent thereof if the offer to purchase as accepted or any other contract document related to the sale, notice we underline that, would require the purchaser to waive, limit, restrict, or otherwise forego an inspection, in whole or in part, blah, 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 blah. So basically they're saying, well, not doing an inspection can't be in any contract-related documents for the sale. Okay, so what's going to happen? Between now and June the 15th, we're going to come up with all new offer forms here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Purchase and sales are all going to get edited. Come on. There's no way we could possibly be ready for this crazy law and then these regulations that are trying to enforce it, but they're obviously having a difficult time. Now, there's other things with respect to the regs that don't make a lot of sense. For example, they're saying 10 days after inspection, buyers will have the right to decide whether they're going forward with the property, counter-offering, etc. So imagine a buyer writes an offer. They say, hey, I'm going to do an inspection within 10 days. Then when it's done, they have 10 more days. Now you're at 20 days? Crazy. Now it does say, well, unless there's another time that's reasonably, I see this in the summary right here, I have it handy. Unless there's another time frame that can be reasonably negotiated between the parties, okay, fine. But when you say 10 days, it becomes somewhat of a norm. So that's an issue for the sales. There's also language which amazes me, that puts us realtors right under the gun. Okay, ready for this? A violation or failure to comply with the law and regulations shall constitute an unfair or deceptive business practice by anyone engaged in the trade of selling real estate under 93A. Well, that right there is going to create a lot more 93A lawsuits against realtors and brokerages right there. That'll cause a lot of people to just get out of the business because they'll say, I don't want to get sued, right? It'll also cause more lawsuits because buyers who get frustrated will point to that, and then it'll get exaggerated. Then there's also a part, check this out on the bottom here of the summary. The draft regulation also provides that the seller's failure to make the home inspection disclosure may be evidence of the seller's intent to misrepresent or conceal a material fact in the real estate transaction and any action brought against the seller. Well, I think they're forgetting that in the state of Massachusetts, sellers have a ton of rights to not disclose just about everything. They're not really forced to disclose very many things here in Massachusetts, and that conflicts with it. So there's many other things, and I could go through them all. Let me look quickly here. I mentioned the 93A, for sale by owners. They're going to have a hard time with this because they're not going to know what to do. They said auctions and short sales, those ones can be exempt, well, or to some extent. These things are not easy. So here is my ask of us realtor friends. For those of you that find some of these laws ridiculous, I strongly recommend that you send an email. We're going to put this email address on the screen right now to EOHLC regulation comments at mass.gov. The subject line has to say comments on 760 CMR 74. And then you can put your comments in. You can point out what you don't like about this. This is a classic example of lawmakers who have no understanding how things work in the practical world, creating laws that will end up hurting the end users. This is not good for buyers and sellers. Now, some of you, especially the consumer advocates, will hear me say that and you'll say, oh, that's not right. We're standing up for the buyers who've been boxed out because they haven't been able to compete with those who can waive home inspections. Well, this isn't fair to those that can waive home inspections either, right? Inventory went excessively low here in Massachusetts over the last 5 years. Well, just today, the inventory of homes for sale just went over a milestone, back over 10,000 homes for sale here in Massachusetts, okay? As inventory goes back up, there will be less multiple offer situations, less bidding wars, and these types of things that happened a lot in the last 5 years will naturally go away. That's how capitalism works. And when lawmakers and laws and regulators get in the way of capitalism, start screwing with things, they hurt people. So I fully understand that the lawmakers who created this had good intention, but you are hurting. You are hurting the buyers who do have the ability to waive and the buyers who don't want to do an inspection. You're also hurting the sellers that would love to take one of those offers. Okay, so this is not a good idea. I know a lot of the home inspectors were behind it. We love our home inspectors. I personally recommend that buyers obtain home inspections, but when they don't want to, like me, I'm a buyer that doesn't get home inspections when I buy properties. I haven't in 21 years. 21 years ago, this month actually, is the last time I got a home inspection on a property. When they don't want to, they should have a right not to. So I would hope that our lawmakers would reconsider this insane law. And if they don't, I hope the regulators can dumb it down even more, because enforcing this kind of thing is unrealistic anyway. That's all. Stay tuned in here to Crush It in Real Estate. We'll be out with more information when these regs get finalized, or maybe the lawmakers get together and work to undo this. We'll update you along the way. Stay tuned in. Thank you.